upstream. We're gonna make cinnamon rolls today. Now this isn't gonna be a normal Zoom session later. I just had some students who asked for the cinnamon roll recipe, so I made a recipe for it and I'm gonna do a video, so if you wanna make these at home, go ahead. Now, I had a large family growing up. There were 6 of us kids. So any of the recipes that my mom gave me, and this is one of hers, it's gonna make a lot. It's gonna make 2 dozen cinnamon rolls. So you're looking at 2 9x13 pans, but that's okay. So first of all, our directions say dissolve yeast and sugar in warm water and then set aside until it proofs. Now, when it means warm water, you're looking at water that's between 110 to 115 degrees, even to 120. So the way you make sure you get that is just turn on your faucet, let it run for a couple of minutes until it's really hot. And so you're not really wanting to put your hand in it. Then that's where you're gonna go, because most people's faucets will only go up to 120 degrees. I'm gonna add my 2 tablespoons of yeast in a bowl. And then I need 1 teaspoon sugar. The sugar helps the yeast proof. And then I add my warm water. Now, if you want to look in the bowl here, you want to make sure that it's all slightly combined. And then you're just going to let it set. You're going to set it aside. And it's going to do the proving by itself. And proving means it's going to start to bubble and you're going to actually activate the yeast and prove that the yeast is working. And so that's what we're going to do there. Now, the next part on your recipe, and you'll see I actually have a line here. This is for each section because this recipe, it's not complicated. There's just a lot of parts to it. For the next part, it says we need 2 cups of scalded or lukewarm milk. Now, what bakers have found is sometimes if you use just regular milk in a recipe, it'll kill the yeast. So if you scald it or heat it up and cool it down, or in our case, we're just gonna microwave it, it changes the chemistry in the milk so it doesn't kill the yeast. So I'm just gonna take my 2 cups of milk and I'm gonna microwave it for about 1.5 minutes. And that should go ahead and make it so that their milk won't kill the yeast. We'll be back in just a minute. So our yeast, if you want to look in right here, it's proved nicely. We know that it's working. I have microwaved our milk, and it's now lukewarm. And in fact, if you get your milk out of the refrigerator, out of the microwave, and the top seems to be steaming, just stir it up a bit, and it'll actually even out the temperature, and it'll be fine. So now, in number 3, in a large bowl, add the milk, the yeast mixture, the sugar, oil, and 1 egg. There's actually only 1/3 cup of sugar in this dough. Not a lot of sugar because we add sugar and cinnamon and sugar in between the layers. So that's why there's actually very little sugar in this dough. Now we're gonna add this, and as you can see, I kind of need to scrape it a little bit to get that all in there. My sugar, my oil, 1/3 cup of oil. You can use vegetable, canola. Might not want to use olive oil, as sometimes it has a little bit more of a bold taste, but you can, it's okay. And then your 1 egg. Then we're going to stir this up. And I don't have a spoon. Be right back with you. So I'm going to mix them all up. I'm going to make sure that egg is actually incorporated. And then it's time to add our dry ingredients. So I have my flour, I have my salt, and my baking powder. Now, if you've baked enough or baked before, you might realize that's kind of weird because we already added yeast, which is a rising agent. That's what makes the dough rise. But baking powder is also a rising agent. And usually you don't have 2 in the same one. However, this recipe can also be a refrigerator recipe, which means you actually make the cinnamon rolls, you get them to their last raising, and then you put them in the refrigerator overnight. And then in the morning, you just take them out and bake them, and you have easy, nice cinnamon rolls in the morning. So that's why there are 2 rising agents. It also helps the rising time to be shortened to the second rise, so that's why. Anyway, I'm gonna add our cups of flour. Now you can see in your recipe, it says 5 to 6 cups flour. When we're baking, we always start with the less amount, the 5 cups, and then we add more flour if necessary. Everything from the size of the egg to the temperature, the humidity in the air can actually alter the amount of flour you need. So we start with the 5 cups, and if I need more, I'll add more. And then I'm gonna take my 2 teaspoons of salt. My trick is to add the flour first, and then layer the salt and the baking powder on top. We need 3 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we're going to incorporate this into a dough, which basically means we're going to stir it till it's a dough. And then we're going to go ahead and start kneading. So I'll see you in a minute. So my lovely assistant Rebecca is actually kneading for me. My wrist can't handle it anymore. So this actually has to be kneaded for 8 to 10 minutes. It's always best to actually do it a full 10. But as you can see, she's just moving the dough, folding it on top of each other. You might need a little extra flour if it gets sticky. And that's what the bowl is there for, because she has some extra flour in it. And we'll check back with you when she's done. Okay, so the 10 minutes are up. Rebecca has really good muscles now. And so the dough, if you look at it, it's really nice and springy. It's not rubbery in any way. It just looks really nice and soft. So the dough is ready. She is going to spray some cooking spray in the bowl and get it ready to go back, or to raise. And then we're actually going to put, you can see it takes up about half the bowl. We're gonna actually put cling film on. This actually really helps it raise. Okay, and so this is actually a little trick. She's gonna spray the top of the cling film and then flip it around. This way, if the dough touches it, it won't actually stick. Okay? And then she's gonna flip it. And then we're gonna let it raise for about an hour. We'll see in a bit. Well, it has raised a whole lot. It is really beautiful. So you're gonna take your dough out. And I'm gonna try to get most of these pieces that are in there. And this again is gonna make 24 rolls, which means we actually have to cut it in half, because each 9x13 pan, you're gonna need 2 of these, is only gonna hold 12. So the first thing we do, actually if you look, we're at number 7, is to cut dough in half and then set half of it aside. So I'm just gonna put half back in the bowl, and I'm just gonna work with 1/2 at a time. Now your recipe says to flatten the dough to make it into a rectangle. Start by actually kind of pulling it apart in a rectangle, using your hands, kind of almost massaging it to get to the right size. And then if you want, you can just keep doing it with your hands, or you can use a rolling pin. And I'm gonna go grab mine so you'll see what it actually look like. But I always wanna start and kind of make it a rectangle first. Otherwise, you kind of just get a big circle blob. And we just use our hands to make it a rectangle. And you're gonna wanna have an even layer thickness. Okay, now that's pretty good. So you're gonna take your soft butter or margarine, and just with a spatula, Just go ahead and do a nice layer of butter. You're going to end up using about 4 tablespoons. So with doing this one and the next one, I'm probably going to end up using about half of that stick. Okay, so that's nice and buttered. And now I have my cinnamon sugar. Now, according to a recipe, you take 1 cup of sugar and then 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon. And you mix it together and then just sprinkle. Make sure you cover all of it. Again, the dough does not have very much sugar in it at all, and we're getting the sweetness from the actual cinnamon sugar that's going in the middle here. Now here's my big tip of the day. On your short ends, go ahead and put the cinnamon sugar all the way to the end, even actually making a little bit of a mess and having it go off onto the side. And that's because probably all of you have had cinnamon rolls at one point in time where you got the end piece and there was nothing on there because the cinnamon sugar only went to here and you end up getting half a roll that had nothing in the middle. Okay, so on the short ends, you put it all the way to the end. And then we just go ahead and roll up, and you can choose whichever end you want to start with, whichever long end. And we just roll it up into a log. As you can see, I'm kind of gripping the dough as I go along to make sure that it's tight. Okay, so there we have it. Now what I'm going to quickly do, I'm just going to grab a wipe here. I'm going to get this extra cinnamon sugar off so we don't end up having it on the side of our dough and burning. Okay, so now I'm bringing this back to me and I'm going to kind of square it up a little bit. Press it down, make sure the seams are really good. Now this is going to have to make 12. Easiest way to do it, don't start cutting this way. Start in the middle. Cut and make a half there. Then this is going to have to make 6. So again, fractions again, just cut it in half. Then this side is going to have 3. So cut it into thirds. Cut this one into thirds. I'm actually using a fish fillet knife. You can see it has a very thin blade. This will actually really help. So then this, again, you're going to cut it into half because this is going to have to make 6. Then into thirds. Okay. So now we have it into 12 pretty equal pieces. I spray my pan. I'm just going to go ahead and take a paper towel and make sure it coats the sides. And then I'm actually going to start from the middle. And you're going to put your cinnamon rolls in like this, evenly spacing them out. Now, with this end one right here, you're going to put this weird end on the bottom, okay? And then if it's having a little hard time sitting up, you just kind of tap it down a little bit. Same thing with this one. You put the weird end on the bottom and just kind of squish it down. Now, you can cover this with cling film like I normally do. I happen to have, though, these lids for mine, which are really cool. Now, as I said in the video before, this has 2 rising agents. So I could, if I want to have fresh cinnamon rolls for my family tomorrow, I could just cover this and put it in the refrigerator. And then tomorrow morning, take it out, let it sit at room temperature for about half an hour while the oven is preheating, and then bake them. And they'll rise in the refrigerator overnight. However, I'm probably gonna cook these tonight. So I'm just gonna set them over here. And then I have to do the exact same process with my other half of dough, okay? So we'll check back in a bit. Now that they're all ready and they're gonna raise, I'm gonna let them raise for, I'm actually gonna check them on half an hour first, because again, they have 2 rising agents. So half an hour and they're probably gonna double in size. Or I could, again, put them in the refrigerator and let them rise all night long and then bake them in the morning. But I'm gonna go ahead and bake them tonight, okay? So I'll see you back when they're ready to bake. Our oven is just about up to temperature and our rolls are ready. They have totally filled the pan, so they're ready to go in. I'm actually gonna do both of them at the same time. I'm gonna put them in just like this. Sorry, my camera crew has left me. So I'm gonna put them in side by side and then I'm gonna switch them halfway through. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my timer. I'm gonna actually set it for 15 minutes. And then I'm gonna go ahead and check on them and switch them. So my timer's going off. I checked it, I'm checking it at 15 minutes. So if you look and see, they're not quite ready yet. They're still very, very pale. I'm gonna go ahead and switch them though, and by switching them, if you need to go over here so you can see, I'm actually moving them to the opposite sides of the oven, just in case the oven cooks differently on either side. So I'm gonna put it back in. I'm actually gonna put them in for about 8 more minutes, because they're really not ready yet. And we'll check back. So they're done. And they actually went in for another full 8 minutes. So this batch took about 23 minutes to bake. Now, kind of didn't plan things really well. See, my daughters have become amazing bakers, which means sometimes I'm out of ingredients. And I'm actually out of all the powdered sugar that we would need for the icing. But that's okay, I'm just gonna tell you briefly how to make it. You take your 3 cups of powdered sugar, has to be powdered. Don't use regular sugar, it won't work. 3 cups powdered sugar, you take your 3 tablespoons of milk, no more than that, because it has to be a stiff icing. And then your 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla, mix it all up, and then you just drizzle it on them while they're still warm. Not totally hot, give them a couple of minutes to cool, and then drizzle them, and it's gonna be gorgeous. But these, to be honest, half the time I don't frost them for my kids because there's enough sugar on them anyway, and you don't need the extra frosting. And I know my kids will enjoy these anyway. So hope you had a good time baking these, and we'll see you next time.